Hi guys, CSDL here, and do I have a stack of books to talk to you about today? This particular stack of books is my favorite books of all time. I may do another one of these videos down the road, but for now, this is the list that I have compiled. I know there's two of the same book here, but we'll get to that. My favorite books of all time. Now what I mean by that is books that either mean something to me, I connected with, or have impacted me, or a book I just really loved and that I just don't have any answer beyond I just really loved it. So the first book we're gonna start with, because it always takes the #1 spot, I don't entirely always know why, but it does, is The Master Harper of Pan by Anne McCaffrey. Now this is the one where I have 2 copies. Yeah, so I love all of Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pan books. I have like 20 maybe of, there's a lot more than that even. I don't have them all, but I will, I'll put a picture somewhere of my bookshelf that is in the stack that is just Anne McCaffrey. I love the way she writes dragons. I think she set a pretty high bar for dragons in fantasy, dragons that are sentient and not just growly, fire-breathing monsters. But this book in particular, The Master Harper of Pan, is about the character Robinson, who you meet in, I think, the first, like, Dragon Rider of Pan books. I'm blanking on the name. I should know it. It's up there. It's up there somewhere. Dragonflight. I think it's Dragonflight. The answer is Dragonflight. And I think I first read my first books by Anne McCaffrey, I think, was the Harper Hall trilogy, which does start in his, but he's an adult and he's already the Master Harper. But otherwise we meet him in Dragonflight, and he's this very calm individual. He can hear dragons. Normally dragons just speak telepathically with their riders. They don't speak to others. They do speak to other dragons, but usually as far as communicating with humans, they just communicate with their riders. But Robinson can hear them. They can communicate with him. He always wanted to be a dragon rider, but it never happened for him. So he's very musically inclined. He comes from a musical family, and in the world of Pan, the musicians are essentially the educators. They teach students, they teach them a lot of different things, but they do teach, you know, their specialty of music as well. There's instruments and voice, and Robinson is proficient in all of them. It's how he becomes the Master Harper, because the Master Harper is the one who runs the music hall. He's the one who, you know, he's the boss of the instruction and the fun stuff like that. So when we first meet him as an adult. He's this really level-headed guy. He's smart, and he helps with the plans of the book. He's crucial. I think he's crucial to the plot down the road, like towards the end of the book of Dragonflight. So I fell in love with him in that book, and I fell in love with him in the Harper Hall trilogy. And then this book is just about him. It's from birth to when he becomes the Master Harper, because we have his story after that. So this is his entire, like, early life, his childhood, his teenage years, and his early adulthood. And I don't know why I love this one so much, but I do, and I love Robinson as a character, and it's just a whole book learning about what made him him is just really, I love it. And I have 2 copies because this is my nice copies. It's very nice and it's not worn and it's a good display book. And then I have the one that's more worn, and I take this one with me places when I want to reread it. I used to reread it like every year, but I've been slacking. I should probably give this one a reread soon, because it's probably my favorite book of all time. It has stayed at the top of my favorite books of all time list. So, yeah. And I do recommend Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pan books if you like a good fantasy. She also world builds very well. Pan is not on Earth, obviously, but they are humans. She has a whole setup, a whole explanation. She has built a whole world around, it's very sci-fi too. You wouldn't think so. Reading like Dragonflight, you don't really get the sci-fi aspects until you read like her prequel books that set up the world, or if you continue through Dragonflight, Dragon Quest, that whole trilogy. The names elude me right now, but then you get to like the later books and then you get back to the sci-fi. So it's if you like dragons and you like a little bit of sci-fi stuff, I would recommend her. The next book I have in the stack is Cell by Stephen King. So I like a lot of King. He is a very good horror, thriller, crime, whatever. You know, that whole genre clump. He can do it. But this one really stood out to me and gets on the favorites list because it's an apocalypse-esque story, and I loved it. I don't usually love apocalypse, zombies, that stuff, because it's so slow and it's hard to get the pacing right. But I think that's one thing that Stephen King does fairly well. He has good pacing with his story, even though he has like a ton of detail in his books. It doesn't feel like the pacing suffers because of it. And this book is essentially about the apocalypse triggered by cell phones. So the only person that's like not turned into this zombie-fied human is people, or this, I think it focuses on a man. I don't remember if there's other people who also didn't, but anyway, the only people not affected would be if you didn't have a cell phone. So it focuses on this man who did not have a cell phone, and he gets to see the fallout from all of that, and he gets to navigate this apocalypse world. And it stuck with me all these years as one of my favorites. The next book in the stack is Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. So this is the first book by Thomas Harris. It is the start of the Hannibal franchise, and yeah. So I love Hannibal. I love Hannibal the movies with Anthony Hopkins. I love Hannibal the show, but shame on me as a fan, I hadn't read the books until this year. And I'm currently working on Hannibal. I've read Silence of the Lambs and I'm partway through Hannibal, but I started with the Red Dragon, and the Red Dragon stood out to me more than the others. Silence of the Lambs, it's fantastic, but something about the Red Dragon just clicks a little better. I think maybe it's the way he writes the crime, or the way the killer is set up, that maybe that's what resonates with me a little bit more. I know Hannibal is like barely in this book, which is a little odd that I would prefer this book more than like Silence or Hannibal itself, but I do love Will Graham. Like, I love Will in the show Hannibal. Will is a wonderful character, and they stayed fairly true. They took a few liberties, but as far as his personality goes, they stayed fairly true. He's a lot sassier in the book, so if you're a fan of the show and you love Will, you will probably love this book because Will has all the sass. And I love Will Graham in this book, and just the way that Thomas Harris has a good way of writing crime novels. Again, with the pacing, crime novels can feel very slow, and it's hard to maintain interest when the story doesn't progress at a decent pace. So pacing is very important to me in a crime or horror novel, and Thomas Harris, I think, does that very well, and I think he does it exceptionally well in Red Dragon. And it's also a fascinating, like, the killer is fascinating. If you like crime novels, if you like Hannibal, the show or the movies, I would give them a read. Particularly this one. Start with this one. Yes. Also, this book, too, because it was written, or at least published, I think in the early 80s, like 81-ish. So the technology obviously isn't going to be very advanced in the book. But again, because he writes it in such a way, like, he writes it in such a way that you don't feel like the book or the story, you don't feel like the story is suffering because they have to take time with their processing and their crime. And like he reminds me a little bit of King with the way he can write details. He's a very descriptive author. And he also has a great way of writing his details, like his descriptive storytelling. His writing style, I suppose, appeals to me, is what I'm saying. But yeah, so if you are a fan of crime novels, or if you're a fan of Hannibal, the show, or the movies, give it a read. This one. Yeah. And just give Hannibal the show a watch. I love that show so much. I will plug that show any chance I get. So yeah, also watch the show. Next book on my stack is from the Sookie Stackhouse novels. Many of you may know True Blood, the HBO series True Blood, that was based off of the Sookie Stackhouse novels by Charlaine Harris. And this one is book 4, or similarly, if you've seen the show, which they took way too many liberties and they deviated so far from the books, but this would be the season 4 equivalent, but better. So the 4th book, I loved the whole series. I love the books so much more than I love the show. The show's fine. The show's okay. But it deviates so far from the books. And they took weird turns with the story. I don't know what they were doing. But the books, their story stays good. Their story stays compelling. And book 4 just stands out as my favorite, I think, because it's kind of an Eric heavy book, and he's like my favorite of the vampires. He's probably my favorite character. Rewatching and rereading some of it recently, Alcide, the werewolf, he's moved up on the list, but Eric is still my favorite. And this book is very heavily focused on Eric because he is bewitched and he loses his memory. Like a witch curses him, or I believe, and he has no idea who he is. He knows he's a vampire, but other than that, like, he knows nothing. Jon Snow. And Sookie gets to play Eric's sitter, and she sees a totally different side of Eric. So normally, Eric is this confident, arrogant, mostly self-centered vampire Viking. And in this book, since he has no memory of who he is, and Sookie has to take care of him with a lot of things, he's essentially this, like, cute little vampire puppy, and we get to see this softer side of Eric, and I love it. And it's just funny. There's a lot of humor in this book. Some of the books are more serious. You know, they have funny moments, but overall the tone is serious. But this one has a lot of humor built into the tone. Like, there's the serious plot going on because they have to fix Eric. Obviously, he can't stay without his memories forever. He's important. He's an important vampire. He's an old vampire. You don't want... That's a bad combination to, like, not have your memories. But, like, a lot of hilarity ensues because of it. So, this one it's on the I just really love it list. And if you like a good vampire novel with a telepathic main character, this one, I'd always recommend Charlaine Harris, like, over Twilight. I'm just saying. Our next book is another supernatural book. This one's part of a series. It's the first book in the series, Shift by Rachel Vincent. This one got me kind of into loving werewolves or shifters. They're not werewolves, they are were-panthers, which makes it cooler because they're cats, and I like cats more than dogs. But they are were-panthers, and this series kind of emphasizes things you don't see as much, I think, in werewolf or shifter-focused books or films. It focuses a lot on the society, the inner workings of a pack or a pride. You get to see the struggles that they face, struggles they have with when other prides or packs are involved. Our main character is a woman shifter named, oh, what is her name? Faith. Oh, duh. I don't like that name. And so, okay. In this series, it's centered around an alpha's daughter, Faith, and it kind of centers around her struggles of wanting to kind of do her own thing, or essentially how she's expected to live up to certain expectations because she's a female shifter and she's the daughter of an alpha, and there's a whole bunch of, you know, very old school expectations that come along with that, and it kind of focuses on the struggles, the internal struggles and workings of a shifter family, a shifter pride or pack, and I found that very interesting, and this got me interested again in the shifter side of things. I'm usually team vampire, but this has gotten me curious and willing to go back a little bit to try more team werewolf or team shifter stuff, because I fell in love with this series as a whole. Next book is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. So, this one is on this list because I read this very young. I think I was maybe in first grade. This might even be my first Harry Potter book. I don't know. It's very old and it's very worn. But Harry Potter is definitely on this list because of its impact it's had on me. I read this, like I said, maybe in first grade, but it really got me interested in fantasy or that magical world. Whatever people feel about her, you know, as an author, I mean, we don't have to like her as an author, but she has done something not a lot of authors can do. Like, Harry Potter encompasses like this huge magical world, and I loved that. You know, and I was very small, and it, like, with Harry, you know, when he first saw Hogwarts for the first time, you know, how magical it felt. And I remember, I think even Harry Potter contributed to my love of cosplay, because I remember when I was reading, and even when I watched, especially when I watched it and I had a visual, The Prisoner of Azkaban, and I would, like, try to dress up like Hermione and, you know, be cool, because Hermione was always, like, my favorite character. I related to her the most, and I remember even trying to cosplay like Hermione before I even knew what cosplay was. So, Harry Potter as a series does hold a special place. Regardless of how I feel about the author, the book still did have an impact on my reading experiences. So, we'll put Sorcerer's... And Sorcerer's Stone is one of my favorite of the Harry Potter books. I also like Prisoner of Azkaban, but I do think the first book, it alternates as my favorite. So yeah, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer or Philosopher's Stone, but, you know, I have the American editions, so it's the Sorcerer's Stone. Oh gosh, I have toppled my list. I've toppled my books. Whoops. Okay, and now, the last book on this list is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I love her books. I haven't read all of them yet. I think I have not read Eleanor and Park, but I have, I think you can see them on my shelf back there, but Carry On and Wayward Son, and those two, oh my gosh, they're not quite my favorite books of all time, but boy do I love them. And you get the start of that in Fangirl, actually, but Fangirl is how those even came to be. And Fangirl is about, essentially, I mean, a fangirl, but she goes to college, and she's kind of an introvert, but the main character is an avid fanfic writer, and she has, like, written this very popular fanfiction. She has a very loyal fan base, and the fanfiction is of two characters. I think that's Simon and Baz up there from her favorite book, and she ends up, I think, even bonding with this dude over the fanfiction. I don't know, but I should reread Fangirl. But I found this book. I was in Barnes & Noble, and I just, like, I saw the word Fangirl, and I saw the computer, and I saw the cover, and I just was drawn to it. I had to have it. I didn't even know what it was about, but I thought I have to have it. And then I read the inside cover and I'm like, I really have to have it. And I don't think I've ever really connected with a book or a character more than I have done with Fangirl. I mean, I love fan fiction. I love to write and read it. This spoke to me in ways books rarely do speak to me. I love books, but they don't always, like, speak to me as a human, as a person. You know, like, I love books so much, but most of the time they don't speak to me. But this one spoke to me, and I loved it so much. And if you get the chance, I would totally recommend reading it. It's also about, you know, her struggles going to college, being away from family, being away from her twin. You know, she's the introvert, her twin sister's the extrovert, and it's a very good, what would you call that? It's not really a coming of age story because she's an adult, but like a transition from her high school life to her new life in college, and also sticking with a hobby that you love and not like feeling like you have to give that up. Now, I could go on a long time about Rainbow Rowell's books, but if you want, I mean, I don't even think you'd have to read Fangirl if you want to read her Carry On and Wayward Son back these about Simon and Baz. Okay. Those books remind me a lot of Harry Potter, if like a fluffier Harry Potter if Draco and Harry were the intended couple of that book. And if one was like a vampire. If that appeals to you, totally check out Carry On and Wayward Son. Her third book to that series, anyway, The Wind Blows, I think she's working on it. I don't remember if there's a set date for that yet, but that is in the works too, so there will be a third one. But this is the one that starts it all. You get to meet the person who wrote, well, she wrote the character that wrote the story, but you know what I mean. We get to see where it started, how the fanfiction started. So this one makes it to my favorites list because of how much I connected with it, which I don't generally connect with books. So I love them, but like I said, they don't connect with me. But this one, we bonded, and really should probably read this again because it's good. It's very good. I'm not gonna put that on the stack. We're gonna move the stack back over here because safety. Book safety. So, those were my favorite books of all time. Maybe we'll do another one of these down the road after I've read more books if the list changes. But yeah, so let me know in the comments if you have favorite books of all time. What are they and why? I would love to have a book conversation with you guys. But otherwise, that's all I have today, and I will see you next time.